It's not based on any evidence. So it's totally not what you should do as a researcher. But maybe what you should do as a human being, and I'm trying to give you a little bit of insight of what I do there. So also bear in mind, this is just my observations. So you might make totally different observations, and I'm happy to discuss this. So this is 100% my view, and N is 1, and yeah. So you were warned. So self-marketing as a researcher, and the first thing that I ask you is, whoops, and the slides don't work. Now we go. There we go. Is why should you care? Why should you care for doing your own self-marketing as a researcher? And the answer, short answer, is you shouldn't. Of course not. I mean, you are indeed, and what we've seen today is exactly what I've written you. You are brilliant researchers. You're doing brilliant research, and people will notice. And people, and these are the people you care about anyway, and not the others. Isn't that the case? So, in the world of science, we seem to think, and this is mostly true from my perspective, is that your thoughts should matter. And that the ideas you work on and the things you investigate and the questions you validate and things you might even prove, that these things are very important and these should be noticed. And I totally agree with that. And this is what we call research. And you publish about this. And in an ideal world, this would be enough for you to receive the recognition you deserve as such a brilliant researcher. And to be invited to more prestigious positions and to do more research and continue on your work. Reality check, is it so? Do you sit at home? Yeah, currently you do. But do you sit at home and ponder about your research and think, someone will notice the great thing I'm doing here right now? Currently you don't have like any option, or do you? So is this the way we should conduct ourselves when going out there? And I think not quite. I think doing brilliant research is the prerequisite. Of course, you need to do this to start actually participating in the community. So you need to do brilliant research. Yeah, that's not the question. But I think visibility makes a difference. So getting recognized in your community matters, and the way you do research when you are connected to your community is also different than the way you do research in an isolated fashion, sitting at home, not talking to other people. And I think in this year particularly, this is very important because we have to somewhat isolate ourselves to get rid of this ghastly virus, of course. But that doesn't mean we should stop communicating and stop being visible to other people. And this is why conferences are important, giving talks is important, and we've heard a lot of good talks today. But what is actually visibility as a researcher? How do we become visible? And I found 3 things to be very important here, and I'm going to walk you through all of these 3 things today. And I think the first thing that you should be findable. So your findability matters. So it should be easy for other people to identify you. And the means you take for this findability, for this recognizability of yourself, they can be quite different. You can wear a funny hat to the conference. People will recognize you for that. Is that what you want to be recognized for? Maybe. Maybe also for your research. So in a way, people should be easily identify you with some topic, or with your name should evoke, this is the person working on this. This would be ideal. But the prerequisite for you to be findable in the community is actually to have a website. And I don't know if it's true I think it's true for all of the senior people in the Zoom call right now. They probably all do have a website. Do you as a junior researcher have a website? If not, take this home for today, do a website. And there's really no excuse for not having a website. It's really easy. So last year I did an online survey for where the participants were actually researchers. So we had to look them up, and we have to look up their emails to actually write them an email. And we could only do this if they had a website where their email was listed on, or if they did publications, but that's a different story. Yeah. And another thing you probably should not do is do not just depend on your institution for your website. You probably all got like at your university or your research facility, you all would probably have like a profile with your picture and your name, and most of the time your teaching responsibilities and stuff like that. This is important, of course, but the thing is, you are mobile. You will probably change universities once, twice, a couple of times in your career, and that's normal. We all do this, but your website probably shouldn't change. And if you find all of these forgotten websites of researchers, it's pretty interesting, you know. And the other thing is, your university might think that when you not work there anymore, they will take down your website. So don't rely on some old university website that you are not working with anymore, and don't get in this kind of dependency to that. And I used my university website for a long time as my sole website, so I'm speaking from my experience there. Don't do this. And it's really easy. So website generators make this easy for you. There are a couple of website generators for scientific profiles that even take your BibTeX and make it look nice and so on. So there's no reason not to do it. And you really, but be sure to customize it a little bit so you are a little bit distinct from anybody else a little bit, so that you are recognized again. And let me reiterate, there is no excuse for not having a website. Even as a junior researcher, do it. It takes you like half a day if you're really slow, and then you have one, and everybody is able to find you and recognize you. This is the person that spoke at UPSLA 2020 about this topic. Well, one thing that I also struggle with a little bit is be consistent throughout your online presentation. So we register at like a numerous amount of websites right now. So you probably all have this conf-researcher.org profile from this conference when you gave a talk. You have your website. You might have a LinkedIn profile. If you are in Germany, you probably also have a crossing account. This is kind of the LinkedIn for Germany, only for Germans for some reason. And you probably have other social media profiles. And these should all, like, in my opinion, conform to one picture of yourself, one online presentation. And you can decide, do you want to put content in all of these platforms, or do you want to kind of merge everybody into one single channel? But that's up to you. But be consistent. So my second thought about visibility is, of course, you need to attract attention. So you should be making it easier for other people to remember you. Why is this the case? Well, think of the usual attention span of a typical professor. And it might look a little bit like this, and I hope, oh yeah, it actually plays. And it might look a little bit like this. So professors, especially if you're senior, you're doing all the things at the same time. You're juggling with 5 balls in the air. Yeah. So make it easy for them to recognize you. If you want to be seen, of course, I mean, if you rotate all the time, it's hard to see a person. But keep this picture in mind when trying to catch the attention of a professor. That's also true for industry, by the way. Because out there, it is an economy of attention. There is a lot of people in the field, and year by year, You can see this in the publication numbers. You can see this in the attendance records every time for conferences. There are more people in the field. And the more people there are in the field, the less likely is it for you to stand out. And so you need to be a little bit forward in catching the attention of someone that you want to really impress. And the thing about that, attracting attention is not very easy. And because it's not very easy, you should take all the chances you have that you get basically for free. Having a conference talk, you don't get for free. You did a lot of research, it's hard work. You did the publication, a bunch of reviews that, yes, this is very good research. And of course, that's not for free. But once you're there, use it wisely. You got that stage for like 15 to 20 minutes or 30 if you are in the doctoral symposium. So use that really wisely. So whenever you get the chance to do a talk, really get into it and think this is the thing where other people will recognize me. And why is this the case? Because great talks really stand out. People will actually notice if you give a brilliant talk. And people will remember your talk. And especially in this year, where all of these talks are being recorded and put to YouTube, either in a live stream, hello YouTube live streams people, and being accessible years after the conference. So last year we all gave talks at conferences. They weren't recorded. At some conferences, some other conferences did so. And these talks were ephemeral. They were like gone. In the minute you left the stage, you were only in the minds of people. And now you are actually recorded and people can see you again. And great talks there really stand out. This is a little bit of a repetition, but I keep saying this to all of my students, graduate or not. Take all the opportunities to speak, always. Well, let other people speak too, but in general, you know, when you get your opportunity to speak at some place, especially that's not your home, your academic home, do it always, because practice actually makes the professional. The pro tip here, basically, that I learned the hard way over time is you do not need to present every time something completely new. This is also true for this talk, by the way. This talk is based on a talk I gave last year. So not all of these slides are completely new for you. Some of them are, by the way. And this is something really I learned over time. You don't need to redo everything every time if you do a talk. It's actually counterproductive. You can reuse a lot, but be aware that you actually have a changing audience. If you give the same talk every week to the same amount of people, they will notice, of course. One thing that my supervisor told me once is publish wisely. This is one of the many ambiguously defined things. So what does this actually mean? When publishing at your current level, you're typically like in the position to get advices from your supervisor, and supervisors usually know the communities best, so listen there. But always think a little bit also outside the box and think, what may extend my visibility? Doug said this in his talk. Also think about workshops. Workshops sometimes are on the lower scale of supervisors saying, should we do this at a workshop? I mean, there's not a lot of attention there and so on. Yeah, but maybe you get the attention from the right people, and the right people that pick up your idea and maybe work on with you on that idea to make it an even greater idea. The ever more popular journal papers that we do in computer science, always go for journal first tracks at conferences. Always give a talk about your journal paper. because otherwise your journal paper, like so many, will be published and probably read by 2 or 3 people, because people don't recognize paper. That's great. Someone said your research is brilliant. Congratulations, but always go for a conference talk afterwards. That's why we have journal first tracks. One thing that Doug also briefly mentioned, always go for artifact evaluation. We have artifact evaluation for 9 years now. Next year we have it for 10 in our community, and this is a great thing. Just so, if you haven't noticed this so far, in computer science we noticed that our experiments are reproducible very easily if we give them to other people, and other people can work upon our results if we make that publicly available. And to make this a little bit more visible and a little bit more accessible to people, and to have peer review also for that, artifact evaluation was invented. And this is a very nice quote I found, presumably by Andreas Seller. I couldn't confirm yet, but I think though, and he kind of funnily shares the story of how artifact evaluation came to its name purely by accident. So if you have a better name for artifact evaluation, the community invites you. But just as a brief history lesson here, so artifact evaluation was introduced at ISAC FSE 2011. Of course, people shared research artifacts before, but there wasn't just no formal process before that yet. And the interesting thing about that is it's quite a success story. And here, this is just a bunch of communities that I picked quite randomly. There are lots of more out there, so apologies to anybody that I missed here. So this is roughly the timeline. So software engineering was kind of the first thing to pilot this. Programming language conferences took off, took that very soon afterwards, and it's widely popular. It's spread through programming language in the community much faster than in software engineering. But other people looked at it, like adopted it as well. And this year, interestingly, also the security community adapted it. It's quite a good thing that we're moving to more visibility of our research. What has this to do with your visibility? Well, first of all, you get a nice badge on your paper. And interestingly, these things are now at the ACM conferences are nice and colorful. And they actually have an effect. And in psychology, they did this a little, almost at the same time. Badging they did before us. And here, this black line is the availability of artifacts for research articles in percent. And the black line is the journal that added artifact badging to their journal. So papers are then badged with this. So you might have done it for the badge, if you did it also. Is it boosting your bibliometrics? Good news is it might. There is some preliminary studies on that. We don't know yet. But it might. It might also boost your visibility. And if you want to know, this is the shameless self-promotion part of the talk. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I actually written a paper about that with 2 brilliant colleagues that was published at FSE. No, this year. I spelled it wrong. It was actually 2020. The only error, but the link is right. So you get the slides and the link is right. And we interviewed all of the artifact reviewers that were out there since 2011. That were over 1,000 people. And they gave us really nice insights about the current state of artifact evaluation. And we did a bunch of things. So if you really want to know what gets your artifact accepted, read that paper. And also have a look at the video, because this was so much work. Doing conference videos, that's so much work. If you have a tool, if you made some good software at some point, do a tutorial. This seriously boosts things. Philip is here also. Philip and I did a tutorial at PLDI 2018 for Phaser, for our static analysis framework, and this boosted usage of that framework so much we couldn't believe it. That was really, really crazy. So every time you have a thing that other people might find useful, do a tutorial. It doesn't need to be a full day, can be a half day to get people hands-on experience on your tools. This works really well. And usually there aren't enough at conferences, so it's also a pretty easy thing. It's a lot of work, but it really pays out. It gets you totally visible. And one thing that people do, that I do not for everything, but for something, is brand your work. The security people, the security researchers are brilliant at this. They have a name for every exploit they find. They even have a logo for every exploit they find. It's interesting. And people in our community do this too. So there is Felix Pauk, and he has a logo for all of his projects. And they look kind of nice, and you see, okay, he has some kind of color scheme going on, and you get some brand recognition here and so on. Of course, that's work, but people see it. And where do they see it? Basically here. If you looked at the laptop backs of all of your students, you would probably see this, a bunch of stickers. And we did this too. We made a lot of stickers, and sometimes you find money for that. These are not very expensive, by the way, and students really love them. They placard their laptop bags with that, and they are your free billboards for your project. If you get a recognizable logo as this one. We were really surprised how many students actually wanted these, so we actually had to order more. And they also go very well at conferences, I might say. So put them on the conference desk and everybody will pick them up. It's interesting. If you've got more funding, of course you can go for shirts if you're more than one person, if you're like a larger project. Mira did this year. I think that was last year, eCoop, I think, I don't know. Oh, that was Splash, sorry. They did this for a project, and it also gets you a little bit of brand recognition if you are with multiple people at the conference. So the third part is also, we now talked a bunch of minutes about how to attract this thing. If you have this now, if you have the attention of people, don't hog it all for yourself. Make it also more easier for other people to stand out as well. And the one thing that we can do very well, there are other things as well, but one thing that you can do really, really easily is use social media. Social media has, and we talked a lot about this in the past couple of years, the dark sides of social media and so on, but it also has a bunch of benefits. Otherwise it wouldn't be in the world. And there's a lot of ideas. What is the ideal social network for computer science or for our fields in computer science? So from my observation, people seem to like Twitter the most. There has been this interesting event by Dave Shepard at this year's ESEC FSE to put Reddit on the map. I don't know if it works out, but let's see. So Twitter seems to work for most people. And the others like LinkedIn and so on, I found them to be a little less effective in getting word out, but your community might totally differ. And the thing about social media, and especially Twitter, is it's called social for a reason. There are different reactions that you can do, and the like isn't like a retweet. So in general, rule of thumb that I do, it's like a like. It's like a pat on the back for the author. I've seen this, I like this, well done. Yeah? If you do a retweet, whether you comment or not, it's like getting on a soapbox and shouting, well, look at them, how great they are. Because all of your followers will see that tweet. All of your followers will add to the impressions of that tweet. But be careful who you endorse and what you endorse, of course. Always read what you retweet. And I think Twitter now forces you to do that, or at least like advises you, well, you're retweeting something without clicking on the link. Are you really certain you want to do that? Of course you should do that. And be certain, like if you retweet, that's the same thing as saying, I would say the same thing, but this person is much more clever than I am. So how does the academic Twitterverse kind of work? So the thing, how I do it is like follow people whose posts you like. Don't think about seniority there. If you find the tweets of another junior researcher entertaining, insightful, or just informative, follow them. If that person happens to be a very famous professor, go for it. But seniority shouldn't be kind of the idea here on Twitter, who you follow and who you not follow. And the other thing is, no one knows if you unfollow, by the way. So if you followed someone and said like, again, the same boring tweet about artifact evaluation, you can click unfollow. This person will never know. By the way, this is a piece from Olafur Eliasson that I took a photo of last year when ECO was in London, so that was great. So that's why we have non-virtual conferences are great, because you get to go to places and photograph art. So a bunch of things that I found working for me on Twitter that I've seen other people as well is, of course, pictures and hashtags. We read a bunch of text all the time. We are good at that. But if we want to go on social media, we are like everybody else. We like pictures. We like visual clues. And pictures get really, really much more attention than just a bunch of text. And even if you have a paper to present, at least show me the front page of your paper, because there's the abstract, and I can read the abstract without following any link. This is really good. And also be certain to link the conferences where you had this paper. Be certain to use the right hashtag for that conference. Sometimes that's hard to find out. The better social media teams make that easier for you, by the way. Also use a bunch of hashtags a little bit outside the box, so other people have this on their screen, because sometimes some people actually follow hashtags. I don't, but some people do. And always treat, so what I do with my Twitter account is I treat it as an experiment platform. So you're all a little bit like the people I experiment on without even knowing, and I check. So there's a lot of analytics going on in Twitter, and you can really see what's going on behind the scenes. So this is 2 tweets from 2019, from last year from me. So these had like very similar expression numbers, as you can see here, but the interactions were quite different. The first one was the one with the left that with the photo I took in the bathroom at ICSI. Actually, where someone posted their front page of a paper to a mirror in the bathroom for some reason. And the other thing is just a paper announcement. And the interesting thing is the interaction is what you want to get high, because this is where other people retweet you and other people see you and recognize you, click on your profile, say, who is this person? And this happened. Also, this tweet got a lot of retweets from a bunch of senior people, and because other people don't follow my advice, but not following just senior people, and they just followed senior people, this got a lot of more impressions. But make your own experiments. Look what works for your community. So I had to find out, and I'm still learning every time I do something. Yeah, but keep in mind, this is from another field. This is the so-called purchase funnel. This is what salespeople use to kind of classify contacts. And of course, you have something like people that are aware of you, people that are interested in you, people that have some desire to work with you, and then the people that actually do it. Yeah? And as you can see, this number narrows down. This is true for sales, but this is also true for scientific collaboration as well. Keep that a little in mind to see. And if you what salespeople do is they make the first thing as wide as they can, and then try to narrow it down. And you should basically do the same in doing so. Going a little bit away from Twitter, blogging, that's more time consuming, but this worked for some people. So Felian Hammonds is very great at that. By the way, I will upload these links and then you can upload the slides and then you can click on the links. So she's really great at blogging. She did live blogging for so many conferences. That was amazing. It's a lot of work, by the way, but that got her a lot of attention, of course. And I think this kind of work also pays back in the end. But as we're talking about publicity and leaving kind of the well-defined boundaries of science, is we need to talk about a little bit what can go wrong, because things can go wrong. Things can go horrifically wrong with communicating research results. And the one thing that I want to kind of sensitize you, I don't know. I have the German word in my head. I want to heighten your sensitivity for that a little bit, is that context matters. So you see this little nice curve, and I didn't make this up. This is actually a photograph that I took. It's actually this lobby. I don't know who designed this lobby, but I found this thing to be really emphasizing, yes, context matters. So the first picture was anything, and the other thing gave you a little bit of context. So context always matters. So whenever you put something out there, be sure to put it in the right context and be sure to communicate precisely what you want and nothing. That's especially true if you have something that you're really excited about. So in Germany, a bunch of researchers had a really good breakthrough in breast cancer research. So they actually are working on a blood test to check for breast cancer. This would make some that you can really do in a large scale manner and that you can do on a regular basis without people having to go through very invasive procedures. And the problem with that is that the university communicated this a little bit prematurely and a little bit shortly. And especially on social media platforms like Twitter, where you have like a 140 character stream to fill, or 300, I don't know what the current rate is. This might happen to you as well. So sometimes it's really hard to shorten research insight. It's hard. It's even hard to shorten it to 10 pages sometimes. Yes, of course, but it's even harder to put it into 140 characters. What is the main thing your paper stands for? And in this case, the researchers failed because they actually had to retract that. The thing about that is that they had a very high false positive rate. So this blood test would really give you a notice, okay, you might have cancer in as high as rates like 46%. This is of course unacceptable, and this is of course not yet a breakthrough. It's very promising research. They did something that other people couldn't do before, but just because it was communicated so poorly, they had to retract that and stand in the public eye for some time as someone that did not do good research. And this is kind of my final word of warning for you. Whenever you do things, think about what could possibly go wrong, and try to communicate as clearly as you would in a paper, but in 140 characters. Thank you very much. Yes, okay, there's also my last slide. If you have like questions for this and other topics, especially on artifact evaluation, let me know.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. So any questions?
Hi, can I make a comment more than a question? I like all this. I have like one counterplay of, don't write your papers full of advertising how wonderful you are, because that really turns off reviewers.
Yeah. I fully agree.
Any other questions? So I'll start with my question. Ben, thank you really for the talk. So can you give an example for like where people get less recognition or collaboration opportunities due to them being not active enough in terms of self-marketing? And are there any telltale features where that indicate a lack of self-marketing among researchers?
That's a hard question, because I mean, how would I know? These people are not recognized, so I don't know them. No, seriously, I'm saying this out of my own history, as of course, because during your PhD you have all things in your head aside from being recognized as a cool person on Twitter, of course, and this is rightfully so. Yeah. Of course, that's what I said. Like the prerequisite for all of this is that you are a good researcher and that you have to do good research. This should be your first and foremost goal. But in the end, if you want to go on in your academic life and your academic career, you need to be recognized by other people, especially if you want to apply to a professor position at some point. You need to be known for some things. And of course, you need to publish on these things. This is the prerequisite. But it's interesting how conversations go if you added to your publication a little bit of extra. If you made that infographic that kind of summarized all of your findings, so people understand it more easily, and more people understand it in a very easy fashion. Think about this image that I had with the professor going from left to right. Yeah, and if you have like only 10 seconds to impress a famous professor, what would it be? Yeah, the so-called elevator pitch in a way, and social media is not that different. I don't have a poster example where things gone wrong, and I don't know if I should point out something like that, but yes, of course, some of my papers are, I think, maybe less cited because I didn't talk so especially about them, and these are like under-recognized, I think, for some things. Some things are rightfully under-recognized. That's okay, but some things, well, maybe more people should know about this. Yeah, but at that time I didn't have the time to do it, or didn't have the motivation to do it. Sometimes that's sad.
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that okay? Sometimes I talk to students and with companies and so on about kind of a lack of an open source presence and building a profile in that space. So I was wondering what your thinking is around that.
Yeah, that's a two-sided sword. I know all of these. Some companies kind of have put it into their interview catalog. And they check for the GitHub profiles or the GitLab profiles of applicants. So this is something also to keep in mind. But on the other hand, I don't think that it promotes a good thing. So if you are a professional programmer and if you're working for a company and if you want to change jobs and the next company expects you to do some famous open source projects on the side in your free time, I don't think that's a good requisition from a company to have that. I mean, you should be recognized for your work you do on in your work time, of course, not everything that you do in your free time also on top of that. For students, I think it's fairly easier because you do have classwork to do. You you can do that publicly. You can learn with adding to open source projects, and you can make your research open. This also benefits the research community, by the way, but also gives you a nice GitHub profile to look at.
Can I just have a comment on that? That sometimes these things align, and I was thinking that, especially with artifact evaluation and the code that we share, it seems like an opportunity where you can kind of show some of your skills, as we kind of all share open source code anyways. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm not so much thinking about the moonlighting activities where you go and do things in your spare time. And then also in work, I mean, in work settings, you may actually be working on open source, I guess, but mostly a comment, but it seems like there's an opportunity there as well.
Of course, there is, definitely. And one thing about artifact evaluation, in our minds as researchers, artifact evaluation and open source and open science is kind of aligning, and it rightfully is so. But for artifact evaluation, it's not really required. You can actually go through artifact evaluation without, in the end, publishing the artifact in a public scale, but just making sure that some other person peer-reviewed your artifact. That's also possible if the situation requires you, especially if you do research with companies. At some points, I see people hesitating from submitting for artifact evaluation because they think, oh, well, then I have to make it all public. Not really true. In some cases, yes, but in most of the times, this is not the requirement. And then you can actually get like these nice badges and the certainty that some other people confirmed your results as well.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may. Ben, thanks for the talk. It was really, really interesting. I agree with virtually everything you said, but personally, I'm not that happy that I agree with it, in that I don't know what being an academic in computer science was like in, say, the 1980s. Maybe Doug can tell us a bit about it. But I just have this feeling there was more time for scholarship. You may have had to get papers mailed to you. You could only read a certain number of things because only a certain number of things were available to you at any one moment. There were not all these opportunities to promote yourself, so you didn't have to because you couldn't, and no one else could either. So my question for you, Ben, and then I'd sort of be interested to know what Doug might think about all this is, are you glad that there are all these things one can do to promote oneself, or do you see it more as a sort of necessary evil because you can't succeed in your career unless you do it?
I don't know if it's actually this important that I cannot succeed without like a successful Twitter presence. I don't think we're at that point yet. I mean, people are successful without any social media presence at all, and this is good. I mean, yes, the old times where you had to write like extensive letters, and these letters had to be carried by courier on a horse, so they took a bunch of months until you actually get a reply. I have these moments where this feels like the ideal setting, where I said, like, okay, I can like take my 3 months to work on this particular thing, and no one will bother me with puny things like replying to a tweet. Of course, this is very tempting, but on the other hand, it has a bunch of benefits. So I had a bunch of very good discussions on science, on particular aspects of science, sometimes also on policy, by the way. This is getting increasing, that policy discussions for conferences are made public on Twitter, strangely, but it is the case. That's also transparency, that's nice. And of course, yes, of course, on the end, it takes away from your time. And I think time management is, in contrast to previous days and previous, also in computer science, previous days as a researcher, has become incredibly more important. So you need to really, I mean, you can lose days and months in Twitter if you like, and have the feeling that you participated in science. In the end, you didn't publish anything, and you didn't achieve anything. That's possible, and you need to kind of lay some rules out for yourself. So, okay, I'm not going to spend the whole day browsing for these answers on Twitter. Of course, this is something we hadn't had to do before. And yes, that's not necessarily good, but in the end, also a lot of benefits come out of that.
I guess people are waiting for my reply to that. Yeah, I think the battle days were worse in that that there's greater equity. Anybody can become an instant YouTube star. Well, anybody can become an instant celebrity in the world of PL by having a good idea wherever it's from, and that's a good thing. And the price we pay for it is that focus and attention are scarce commodities these days. It's harder to do things in a sustained way when you are okay, every hour or two checking 538 to see what the polls are, because you can.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
And I see that Guido Savaneschi is actually wearing the T-shirt that I've shown. I haven't noticed that before. Great. Being on brand.
I'll take the liberty to ask a question then. So I see more and more Twitter profiles belonging to groups, organizations, universities, even research projects within universities. And what do you think is the role of these profiles? So do they promote researchers? Do you think there is a tension between, the researchers' recognition and institutional recognition, so to say? Can you comment on that?
I think I can. I have a distinct opinion on that. So I do follow some university accounts, especially my own or my previous employers, to kind of follow what they are working on. Sometimes I found like research group accounts quite interesting, if they're quite close to me. I usually don't follow project accounts so much because they are either incredibly boring from my view, or they don't post a lot. They have this odd, well, we published a new version of our tool post, and then you hear nothing from them for 3 months. So you literally forget them. While when there's a person behind that, I can see an opinion, I can see a bunch of related information that is kind of relevant to me most of the time, sometimes not, of course. And I have the impression that I'm at least having a conversation with a person. I think like these accounts, these institutional accounts make sense for reaching a broader audience, especially if it's like a complete university. Then of course this account has a lot of followers that have nothing to do with the university, that just want to keep up with research. And if you have, and these are parts of the marketing efforts done by your university, and these make sense to me. These totally make sense to me. When it comes down to research projects, if it's a really large research project that's relevant to me, and if they really do an effort and have a person like curating that, that might be interesting. But usually people just make an account for their project and then they tweet about this project, and they are really putting effort in the first few weeks, and then they really drop silent, and I don't know where the point is.
Any more questions? Okay, great. So we'll have a short 10-minute break, and then we're going to have the last talk today given by Alistair. So please stick around. And if you have any more questions, you can always talk with Ben in the Zoom chat.
Can I ask one more question, because I think it might be relevant for the students here, just a brief one. Ben, what would you advise students about how often to participate in on artifact evaluation committees? I know from my students that it's been quite a mixed experience. It can be a great thing to do. It's a big time commitment.
It is.
For career, I mean, like selfishly, if you're being sort of somewhat selfish, how good for your career is it to do them?
I don't know how good for your career is. I mean, you get recognized, you are in a committee and you participate in peer review. So that's always a good experience. Also, in artifact evaluations, you have the distinct pleasure of looking at other people's implementations and seeing, well, mine isn't so bad. Because as research, especially as junior researchers, we are perfectionists, and we look at that and say, I can never submit to artifact evaluation. This looks, if someone looks at this source code, I will lose all of my dignity. No, of course not. It's research code. It's most of the time hacked together in a night session. We all do that. It's fine. At artifact evaluation, we just need to make sure that it's documented in a way that other people can actually run it, that it doesn't blow up in your face. And for this, artifact evaluation is a good way of getting rid of that syndrome of being a perfectionist in your engineering tasks, because this usually doesn't help a lot. On the other thing, I think artifact evaluation currently as we do it might not be doing the thing that we think it does. So we're still not certain why we're doing artifact evaluation. One of the outcomes of my study. We do have a sense that it helps to, it might help replicability of our results. We don't know that yet. And for this, it is a lot of work. So I don't think as a PhD student, you should do it like, it's hard to give a rule of thumb, but don't overdo it. I mean, participate in 1 and 2. There are a lot of PhD students out there. There are a lot of artifact evaluation committees out there. So do like 1 or 2 in your PhD time. This should probably be enough to have a learning effect for you and be a service to the community and be visible. But don't do it every year. And don't do it 3 times a year, because it's a very straining process. And I did a bunch of artifact evaluations myself. You spend the whole week, and in the end, you don't know. And currently, as it's not a thing where it's a totally voluntary process, at the end, you might get that feeling that your voice didn't matter as a reviewer. We heard that voiced a lot in our survey. And this is not necessarily a very pleasant thing. If you think that your effort as a reviewer is not heard, and then a paper where you found that the results actually don't replicate gets accepted, that's not a good feeling. And so we're still figuring out the process currently, as it's kind of our most newest peer review process, I would say. In the computer science field, and we're still trying to figure out what that thing actually is, what it's for, and how it should be done properly. And so don't over expose yourself to that experiment, but participate.
Can I ask a quick follow-up there? Do you think that artifact evaluation will sort of move towards being happening earlier, given the case that you just gave?
Maybe. That's up to the communities to decide. I can't predict that. I think it might. I think we might move into territory where artifacts, I mean, we actually do. So if you look at PLDI this year, they told me they had like from 70 accepted papers, they had like 60 artifacts. I mean, that's brilliant. That's great. But we're moving into territory where artifact submission gets to be the norm rather than the exception. And then we get into territory like ICST does it this year, where they actually, or next year, I think, where they actually want to have a sentence of explanation from you if you don't submit an artifact. Mm-hmm. I think we're moving there first, and at some point it slowly creeps into normality, and we will all do it anyway, quite naturally. I don't know if the evaluation processes as we do them will be still the case. I think they also will be a little bit adapted.
Hmm.
Oh, I see someone already mentioned. Alistair's talk is in an hour, or yes?
Yeah, sorry, I just made a mistake. So we've still got 1 hour and 5 minutes before Alistair's talk. So we've still got plenty of time for discussion if you want.
I am out for then.
Yeah, so to all the juniors, do artifact evaluation, at least participate as a submitter. It's really worth it. And I got comments on artifacts. So people approached me and said, oh, thank you for doing an artifact there. It really helped my research. And this is a great feeling, because previously, I mean, there was this burden. You looked at the paper and you're like, I have to write this person an email, and if they still have it, and so on. So a lot of research artifacts were kind of lost because people didn't archive properly. And that's especially true when you are a PhD student, and when you leave the academic field at the end of your PhD, when you received your PhD, when you graduated. Why should you care about research after that? That's kind of an open question. So having artifact evaluation like normalize the archival of these things and kind of harmonize and standardize it in a way that we all know how to do it and all know where to look. And this is the real benefit that actually might have the most impact. We'll see that. We don't know that yet. It's still too early to say. But I think we're on the good way there. As to the higher goals of replicability and reusability, I hope we'll get there. I most certainly do. We don't know that yet, and let's keep artifacts pumping out artifacts, because we do them anyway. I mean, you work on that anyway, and you might as well just upload it. It might be helpful for someone in the long run. You don't know that before, and you don't know if someone can reuse this. They might be able to.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. And do we have any more questions? If no, we'll close this session for now, and we'll have an 1 hour break and until the next talk. Yeah, thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.